I grew up in Willow Creek, the kind of mountain village that maps reduce to a dot and city people romanticize into a postcard. In reality, it was work. Terraces cut into slopes like old scars, winters that tightened your lungs, summers that demanded every waking hour, and a river that decided whether your week would be ordinary or a disaster. My adoptive parents, Liang Shuren and Zhao Fen, never told me I was adopted in the sentimental way dramas prefer. There was no candle, no trembling confession, no moody storm outside. My mother simply said, when I was old enough to ask why our photo albums started late, that I had arrived one night from the county clinic with a paper bracelet on my wrist and a fever on my skin. You were small, she said, but you held my finger like you had already chosen us. My father nodded and added, we chose you too. That is the end of the story that matters. If you had asked me then what my future would be, I would have pointed to the ridge behind our house and said, there, because my imagination ended where the road ended. The village raised me by committee. Grandma Chiu, who was half-deaf and fully fearless, fed me steamed buns and loud advice. Uncle Du taught me to use a hoe before I was tall enough to swing it properly. Auntie Tan made me recite multiplication tables while she pickled vegetables. When my adoptive parents died early, my father from an accident on a wet slope, my mother from a stubborn illness she refused to treat until it was too late, the village kept me standing. They paid my high school fees in crumpled bills. They sent me off to university with sacks of dried corn, a quilt that smelled like sun, and instructions to return as soon as I learned anything useful. I did return, not because the city rejected me, but because the village needed someone who could speak both languages, the language of soil and the language of paperwork. I studied agricultural economics and rural development, then took the township exam and became the kind of local official people complain about until they meet a good one. I drafted plans, chased grants, and argued with contractors. I convinced two feuding households to step back from a boundary dispute by offering them a better idea. Leave a strip of land between your properties, and we will pave it into a flower path. Then you can both sell snacks to tourists who come to take photos. It was not magic, just stubborn math. In Willow Creek, survival was always a calculation. The truth arrived anyway, and it arrived wearing leather shoes that did not know our mud. I was 26, carrying sacks of feed up a dirt track, when a black sedan stopped beside the maize field like a wealthy insect that had lost its way. A man stepped out with a folder clutched to his chest. He introduced himself as Lu Jiancheng, and the name meant nothing to me until he added Hanjiang City, and then it meant distant glass buildings and the shipping company whose logo I had seen on television. He asked my name as if it were a code. When I answered, his face tightened. You are Liang Miao, he said, voice careful. I am your father. I laughed, because if you grow up in poverty, you learn to laugh at nonsense before it has a chance to hurt you. Then he opened the folder. There were hospital records, DNA results, and a photograph of a newborn with my birthmark visible near the collarbone. He pointed to a line on a form that listed the wrong baby going to the wrong mother, a human error made during a chaotic night at the county clinic 26 years earlier. The clinic had been understaffed, the power had flickered, the nurses had swapped bracelets by accident, and then, later, by fear. One family had money, one family had none. When the scandal was buried, it stayed buried until a routine genetic test for a medical procedure unearthed it like a fossil. You were not abandoned, Lu Jiancheng said quickly, as if the word were poisonous. You were taken by mistake. We only found out recently. Behind him, a woman sat in the sedan, gripping the door handle with white knuckles. When she stepped out, her face was elegant in a fragile way, the way porcelain is elegant. Meow, she whispered, and her voice cracked. She was Lu Wenya, my biological mother. She moved toward me and stopped, uncertain whether she was allowed to close the distance. I had never seen anyone rich look so helpless. My village neighbors watched from the field edge, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. In Willow Creek, strangers are either buyers or trouble. I agreed to go to Hanjiang for one reason. I wanted the question that had always hovered around my loneliness to finally have a shape. I did not pack for belonging. I packed like I was going on a work trip. A small backpack, my notebook, a clean shirt, and the cheap wristwatch my mother had left me. When Wenya tried to hold my hand, I did not pull away, but I did not squeeze back either. I was polite, not hopeful. The Lu estate sat behind pale walls and cameras angled like unblinking eyes. Inside, the air smelled of citrus polish and expensive flowers. A butler tried to take my bag, and I kept it on my shoulder. Not because I feared theft, but because letting go felt like surrender. Wenya led me through rooms that looked designed for photographs, rather than living. A living room where sofas were arranged like diplomacy, a dining hall too long for laughter, a staircase with a railing so glossy it could have been water. 2 men waited in the sitting room, both wearing the same calm arrogance, both looking at me like a surprise shipment that had arrived damaged. "So you're the other one," the taller said. He introduced himself as Lu Yichen, the eldest son. His brother, Lu Yiran, smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. They did not say sister. They did not say welcome. They said, almost in unison, "You don't look like you belong here." A young woman entered then, and if I had been a different person, I might have felt threatened by her beauty. Lu Suyin was graceful in the way training makes someone graceful. Shoulders back, hands delicate, expression gentle. She wore a cream dress that probably cost more than my village's annual fertilizer budget. She walked straight to Wenya and slipped her fingers into my mother's hand, claiming space without raising her voice. "Mom," she said softly, and then she turned to me with a faint tremble in her smile. "Hi, I'm Suyin. I'm sorry." Wenya's expression changed when she looked at Suyin. It softened. It became practiced. I watched it and understood without needing anyone to explain. Wenya loved the child she had raised, and my arrival was an earthquake she hoped would stop after the first tremor. Lu Jiancheng cleared his throat like a man beginning a contract negotiation. He said they wanted me home, but I would need to learn and adjust. Wenya added that the family had social obligations, and she worried I might be overwhelmed. Yuran, impatient, leaned forward. "There are functions," he said. "Investors, media. You can't show up looking like that." I glanced down at my clothes. My shirt was plain, my jeans clean, my hands rough. I looked like myself. Wenya's gaze slid over me as if assessing a product. "We prepared a room," she said quickly, and led me upstairs. It was pink curtains, pink bedding, pink perfume bottles lined on a vanity. The room was a shrine to a teenager I had never been. Wenya stood in the doorway and said, hopeful and guilty at once, "We remembered you liked pink." I remembered writing an essay in middle school about a dream bedroom, because dreaming cost nothing. I remembered Mei Liu, a classmate's mother, laughing at my handwriting and saying village girls should not pretend. I remembered my adoptive mother reading that essay and smiling like it was a prophecy. The room in the Liu house felt like someone had taken a cheap wish and built it into a cage. At lunch they brought up the true topic. Years ago, long before the swap was discovered, the Liu family had made an informal agreement with the Tang family. A marriage alliance. "It was meant for our daughter," Lu Jiancheng said carefully, as if the word could be stretched to fit both of us. "Now that you are here, we should correct what was misassigned." I put down my chopsticks. "You mean you want to marry me off to stabilize a partnership?" I said. "You want a symbol?" Yi Chen smiled as if I had said something amusing. "That's not a dirty word," he replied. "It's business." Suyin's fork froze midair. Her eyes flicked to Wenya, then to me, then down. For a moment she looked like someone holding her breath underwater. Wenya reached across the table and patted Suyin's wrist without looking at her. "Suyin is sensitive," Wenya said, voice soft. "We don't want her to feel replaced." The sentence was gentle. The meaning was not. I was not a daughter to be cherished. I was a problem to be managed. I left before the tea was poured. The butler moved to intercept me, and I walked around him. Yuran laughed and said I was bluffing to make them chase me. Yi Chen predicted I would return by nightfall, because country people can't resist comfort. Wenya called my name once, but her voice held more fear of inconvenience than fear of losing me. Suyin rose halfway from her chair, then sat back down when Wenya's hand pressed her shoulder. I saw the motion, and I stored it, not as a grudge, but as data. At the gate, Lu Jiancheng followed. "Meow," he said, using my name as if it could glue me in place. "You can't just walk away. You're our blood." I looked at him. "Blood is not a residence," I said. "It doesn't cook dinner. It doesn't sit with you when you're sick. It doesn't build a bridge when the river takes it." His face tightened, confused and offended. He had expected gratitude. He had met an invoice. I returned to Willow Creek with my backpack in a strange calm. The village did not ask for gossip. They asked whether I was hungry, whether my shoes were dry, whether the township had responded to my bridge funding request. Grandma Chiu smacked my arm and said, loudly, "I told you rich people are noisy." Uncle Du offered me a cigarette. I refused. then muttered that the Liu family should be ashamed. No one told me to forgive. No one told me to hate. They simply made room for me in the life we were already building. I assumed the Liu family would take my departure as an answer and leave me alone. I underestimated how deeply wealthy families believe the world is something they can retrieve on command. A week later, I was mediating a land dispute between two households when the village office door darkened, and a woman in heeled boots stood there, dragging a suitcase that immediately sank one wheel into wet ground. She yanked it free with a curse that slipped out before her manners returned. Lu Suyin, in designer clothing now streaked with mud, looked around as if expecting the village to apologize for existing. She tried to speak, but my villagers spoke first. Someone offered her water. Someone laughed at her shoes. Someone pointed her toward my house as if this were normal. Suyin's cheeks flushed. She walked behind me to my small brick home, the one my adoptive parents had built with their hands. Inside, she stared at the faded family photo on the wall, at the simple table, at the patched quilt folded on the bed. "This is where you live," she said. Not as a question, but as a revelation. "This is where I work," I corrected. "Living is what we do between emergencies." Suyin sat down and then stood up again, unable to settle. Finally, she said, "They're trying to marry me to Tang Zehao." The name meant little to me, but her expression told me everything. "He's 38, she continued, voice sharp. "He thinks women are accessories. My brothers promised him I'd be obedient. They said I owe the family." Her eyes watered with anger rather than sadness. "They think I'm easy to steer because I've been grateful my whole life." I looked at her, and I saw something I had not noticed in the Liu house. Exhaustion. Suyin had been raised like a porcelain doll, polished into the perfect heiress, praised for elegance, rewarded for compliance. The moment she tried to act like a person instead of a display item, the family's affection turned transactional. "Why come here?" I asked. "Why not run somewhere else?" Her jaw clenched. "Because this house used to belong to my birth parents," she said. "I saw the clinic records. They lived here. They died here. I don't know how to feel about that." She hesitated, then added quieter, "And because you're the only one who can say no to them without shaking." That was not admiration. It was desperation. I did not owe her shelter, and she did not owe me apologies. Yet the village had raised me with a principle older than any contract. If someone is running from harm, you do not ask whether they deserve help before you open the door. "You can sleep in the spare room," I said. "But we're not friends. We're not sisters. We're two people with a shared disaster." Suyin nodded fast, relieved. "Fine," she said. "Distant is safer." The words sounded like a promise she had made to herself long before she met me. The rain started 2 days later, and with it my calendar turned into a list of emergencies. I rode my electric scooter to each elderly home, shouting so Grandma Chu could hear, climbing onto roofs so Auntie Tan would not try to do it herself, and accepting gifts in return because refusing would insult their pride. When I returned, my basket of supplies was empty, and my bag was full of odd offerings. Dried yams, sticky cakes, a tin of candies hard as stone, and a lump of brown sugar wrapped in newspaper. Suyin watched me unload them, then wrinkled her nose and tried one of the candies. Her teeth squeaked against it. "Is this expired?" she asked, horrified. "It's from last year," I said. "Grandma Chu saved it because she thought it was precious. She forgot what year it was. She just knew it came from me." I poured hot water over the candy to soften it into a syrup and handed it to her. She took a sip and looked offended by the taste, but she drank anyway, because she was learning that pride in a village is shaped differently. The river rose slowly at first, like a patient threat. We had a stone footbridge and an older wooden span higher up. In dry weather, the wooden bridge groaned under footsteps like an old man complaining. In rain, it became dangerous. Children needed to cross to reach school. Farmers needed to cross to sell vegetables. The clinic, the only one that stocked emergency medication, was on the other side. I filed funding requests, called township offices, and received the same answer dressed in different clothing. Budgets were limited, priorities were many, delays were unavoidable. That is how disasters are born in poor places, not from one failure, but from 1,000 small, later decisions. On the third night of rain, panic arrived in the shape of a child. Grandma's son burst into my doorway, screaming that her grandson was convulsing, foam at his mouth, skin burning, eyes rolling back. In normal conditions, the clinic was 10 minutes away. That night, the water swallowed the footbridge. People gathered with flashlights, shouting over the rush of the current. Suyin stood among them, clutching an umbrella that turned inside out in the wind, her face pale with disbelief. "We could take the mountain road," someone suggested, but that road would cost 2.5 hours, and the child did not have that much time. Men argued. Women cried. The river roared and refused to care. I tied a rope around my waist and handed the other end to 3 strong villagers. "No," Suyin said sharply, stepping in front of me. "You'll die." "I might," I replied. "He will if we don't move." I looked at the wooden bridge, half submerged, its railing slick. I had walked it dozens of times and knew which planks held weight and which did not. If I go first, I can test it. If it collapses, you pull me back. Grandma's son fell to her knees, sobbing. Someone tried to volunteer in my place. I refused, because if I was wrong, I wanted the mistake to cost only one body, not several. I crossed in short steps, hands numb from rain, feet searching for solid wood. The bridge groaned like a warning. The rope tightened behind me, a living connection to my village. Halfway across, a log slammed into the railing, and the impact sent a shudder through the whole structure. My heart stuttered. I did not look down. I moved. When my boots hit the far bank, the village's collective breath released in a sound that was half cheer, half prayer. We carried the child in a door, turned into a stretcher. The clinic doctor met us at the entrance, swore at the weather, and took over with hands that did not hesitate. The boy's convulsions slowed. His breathing steadied. The doctor said, "You were lucky," and I wanted to punch the word, because luck is what people say when they do not want to admit this should have been preventable. I caught a fever from the river and spent 2 days in bed, refusing to rest in the way poor people refuse. With guilt. Suyin made soup badly and then tried again. Grandma Chu visited and shouted that I looked thinner, which was her way of saying she was scared. When I finally stood up, my legs wobbled like bamboo in wind. I went to the township office anyway. The township head was a tired man with a thinning hairline and a desk piled with forms. He looked at me with dread when I walked into the lobby and sat on the bench. I did not demand. I did not threaten. I waited. When he went to lunch, I stayed. When he tried to leave through the side door, I smiled and followed. When he went to the restroom, I sat outside, reviewing my bridge proposal by flashlight. On the 3rd day, he slammed a stamp onto the approval form and cursed that I was worse than a debt collector. "Fine," he said. "We'll fund a new bridge. But if you ask for another project this year, I'll pretend I don't know you." I bowed. "You'll still know me," I said. "You'll just be happier." Back in Willow Creek, the village cheered as if the stamp were a trophy. We measured the riverbanks, marked pillar points, and recruited a contractor who had once lived in a neighboring village and still remembered what it meant to be cut off in rain season. Suyin watched the planning with a frown. "You fight for this," she said quietly, "like it's your child." "It's not my child," I answered. "It's my responsibility." The Liu brothers arrived the day we began digging. Their black SUV looked ridiculous against our red clay. Yichen pinched his nose as if our air offended him. Yiran scanned the village like he expected it to bow. "We're taking her," Yiran announced, pointing at me as if I were luggage. "This farce ends today." I was waist-deep in mud, supervising a crew shaping the lotus pond's edge. "Which farce?" I asked. "The one where you pretend I'm family when you need something?" Yichen's smile thinned. "Stop acting proud. You don't understand what you're refusing. Hanjiang is opportunity. This is dirt." "This dirt fed me," I said. "It fed all of us. Don't insult what you could not survive." They tried to drag me anyway. 2 men in plain shirts moved in, grabbing my arms. Before I could twist free, a ring of villagers closed around us. Hoes, shovels, and bamboo poles appeared like sudden teeth. Grandma's son, still raw from her grandson's near death, held up a kitchen knife and screamed that nobody would take me. Uncle Du stepped forward with a shovel resting on his shoulder, calm and terrifying. "She stays," he said. "You want her to go. You ask her. You don't snatch her like a chicken." Yichen looked shocked that villagers had a spine. Yiran tried to lecture about blood and legal rights. I laughed. "Try kidnapping a public official who's managing a government program," I said. "Let's see how your brand looks when the provincial office hears you dragged me through mud." That finally reached whatever part of their brains understood consequences. They retreated with threats about inheritance. They promised I would get nothing. They said the Liu family would cut me off. I watched their SUV struggle to reverse on the narrow village road and felt no fear. I had never owned their money. I had never needed their approval. Their threats were like rain on a roof. Loud, meaningless, temporary. Suyin left for Hanjiang the next week. "I can't hide behind your village," she said, face tight with shame. "If I stay, they'll keep coming, and they'll punish you for sheltering me." "Then go," I replied, not unkindly. "Fight your war where your battlefield is." Before she left, she warmed a cup of milk on the stove, the way my adoptive mother used to do when I was a child, and storms made the house feel too small. She set it on the table and said, without meeting my eyes, "I don't know how to repay you." "Don't," I said. "Just stop letting them turn you into a tool." She nodded once. "We keep distance," she murmured, repeating the pact she had made in my house. "But we don't become enemies." After she left, news reached me in fragments, carried by gossip that traveled faster than trucks. Suyin refused the Tang engagement publicly. The Liu brothers raged. Tang Zihao's family threatened retaliation. In a banquet hall full of smiling executives, someone tried to slip something into Suyin's drink to make her look unstable. Suyin swapped glasses at the last second, then quietly recorded the panic on the face of the person who realized the wrong woman would be drugged. She handed the evidence to the board's independent director, a stern older woman who had always been treated like furniture by the men around her. The director finally had a reason to flip the table. Yichen and Yuran were removed from day-to-day operations pending investigation. Wenya cried on television and said the family was misunderstood. Lu Jiancheng issued a statement about internal reform. Suyin did not smile in any of the photos. She looked like a person learning to carry her own spine. Back in Willow Creek, we built. The bridge pillars rose from the river like stubborn bones. We installed temporary cables for safety. We taught children to take the mountain path on the worst days and built a shelter on the near bank with blankets and a kettle. I ran training sessions for villagers on intercropping techniques. I showed them soil tests and cost calculations. I promised, not with empty optimism but with spreadsheets, that we could make the land feed us better. Then the mountain answered the rain with violence. For days I watched the slopes with a cold knot in my stomach. Soil swelling, roots slipping, stones whispering down gullies at dusk. I begged households under the cliff face to evacuate, but some refused because moving feels like admitting defeat, and because people who have always been poor do not trust warnings until they arrive as disasters. On the evening the landslide came, the air changed. I heard a sound like cloth ripping, and then a roar that turned my spine to ice. "Run!" I screamed, sprinting toward the lower houses, dragging an uncle out by his jacket, pushing a child toward the road. Mud and rocks poured down like a living animal. Dust filled my mouth. I saw Grandma Chiu standing in her doorway, confused and stubborn, unable to hear my warnings over the storm. I ran to her, grabbed her wrist, and pulled. She resisted, swatting my hand. "What are you shouting about?" she yelled. "About staying alive," I shouted back, and yanked harder. We made it 5 steps before the ground shook. I shoved her toward the road and threw myself under a low wooden table in the nearest shed, because I had no time for a heroic pose. The world went dark. Something heavy pressed my back. My lungs shrank. I heard voices far away calling my name, then silence, then the sound of shovels hitting earth. I woke in the county hospital 2 days later with a throat full of dust and a bruise blooming across my ribs. The hallway outside my room was packed with villagers. Their hands were bandaged, their nails were broken. They looked exhausted, filthy, and furious. Uncle Du pointed a finger at me and swore he would tie me to my bed if I ever ran toward danger again. Grandma Chiu, tears cutting clean lines down her dirty cheeks, shouted that she was too old to be saved and I was too young to be stupid. Grandma Sun brought her recovered grandson, who bowed to me so seriously it made my chest ache. I looked at them and understood, with a clarity that hurt. My village was my family, not by blood, but by choice repeated every day. When I returned to Willow Creek, the landslide scar on the mountain looked like an open wound. We rebuilt the damaged houses with help from the township and donations that arrived because one short video of villagers digging me out had gone viral. Strangers on the internet praised our community spirit. I read the comments and felt nothing. Praise did not pour concrete. What poured concrete was the village's decision to keep moving. The bridge was completed before the next rainy season. The first time a bus crossed it without slowing, children cheered and old men pretended not to smile. We paved the flower path between the once feuding households and hung wooden signs painted by school kids. We installed solar streetlights. We built a small visitor center out of a renovated storage shed and stocked it with local tea, dried fruit, and the sticky cakes Auntie Tan now made with packaging that looked professional. Tourism grew the way green grows after fire. Fast, surprised, persistent. Our first major harvest under the new plan was bright and cruel in its timing. The citrus trees on the upper terraces produced fruit with thin skins and a sweetness that made children close their eyes when they bit in. The problem was not quality. The problem was distance. Local carriers raised their prices the moment they realized we had something worth moving. Smaller logistics firms refused mountain routes, claiming insurance issues. Crates of fruit sat in the storage shed like gold that would rot if nobody carried it away. The villagers' excitement curdled into panic. People who had trusted my plan now looked at me with the fear that always arrives when money is promised and then delayed. "We can't eat contracts," one man muttered. "We can't feed kids with future." I sat in the village office, staring at the numbers until my eyes burned. Then my phone rang, and the name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Lu Suyin. Her voice was steadier than I remembered. "I can move your fruit," she said. "Not as a favor, as a contract." "What changed?" I asked. "My brothers no longer control the logistics arm," she replied. "I do, or I will, if I don't fail." She paused, then added, "I'm tired of watching other people decide what my life is worth. I want to build something that actually moves." I did not trust her because I liked her. I trusted her because she had something to prove and because she now understood, painfully, what it felt like to be treated as replaceable. We negotiated like business partners, not like sisters. We set volume guarantees, pickup schedules, payment terms. She sent trucks on the mountain road 2 days later, and when the first crate left the village, the collective tension in Willow Creek released in a cheer that startled birds from the trees. Suyin came in person a week after that, stepping out of a plain SUV with boots that could handle mud. She still looked like herself, polished, attractive, sharp, but the helplessness had burned off. She walked through the citrus terraces with a notebook, asked farmers about pruning, listened to their complaints without flinching. When Grandma Chu offered her a sticky cake, Suyin took it and ate it without making a face. Grandma Chu squinted at her and said, loudly, "You look less decorative now." Suyin laughed, surprised by her own sound. That night, Suyin and I sat outside my house on low stools, watching fireflies blink above the lotus pond. "They're trying to call you back," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. Wenya had been sending messages full of guilt and praise, telling me she had finally realized I was thoughtful and reliable. Yichen's assistant had requested my presence at a charity gala to display family unity, as if I were a banner they could hang. Yiren had threatened that I would receive nothing unless I returned and obeyed. Suyin's jaw tightened. "They don't want you," she said. "They want what you represent. You survived without them, and that embarrasses them." "What do you want?" I asked her, because I had learned not to assume. Suyin looked at the dark mountain outline and answered slowly, "I want to keep my word." We said distance. We said no entanglement, but I also want to stop being scared of their shadow. She glanced at me. "I won't ask you to come back. I won't ask you to forgive them. I want you to know you weren't wrong to leave." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "And you weren't wrong to come here," I said, "even if you arrived wearing shoes that hated mud." She smiled, small and genuine. "I threw them away," she admitted. "Best decision I've made all year." After the first successful shipment, new problems surfaced the way weeds surface after rain. Not everyone liked that Willow Creek was becoming visible. A broker from the county came to invest in our terraces, which was a polite way of saying he wanted to lease land cheap and resell produce under his own brand. When villagers hesitated, he tried to frighten them with legal jargon and hinted that city partners could make life difficult. He assumed I would fold because I was young and female. I asked him to put every offer in writing, then forwarded it to the township legal office with a note. If someone is trying to buy land through intimidation, the program's integrity is being threatened. The broker stopped calling within 24 hours. Then rumors arrived from Hanjiang. A local tabloid published a story about the wild daughter who had rejected luxury to chase power in a village, implying that I had seduced donors and misused public funds. The language was lazy and sexist, and it would have died quickly if the Liu family had not quietly encouraged it. My villagers brought me the paper like it was evidence of a crime. Uncle Du wanted to march to the city with a shovel. Grandma Chu wanted to sue everyone and asked, sincerely, whether we could sue a newspaper with a broom. I handled it the way I handled everything, with documentation. I published our project accounts on the village bulletin board. Every grant, every receipt, every contractor invoice, every meeting attendance log, every procurement bid. I invited the township audit team to sit in our office for 3 days and comb through paperwork until their eyes glazed. When they found nothing, they issued a short statement affirming compliance. It wasn't glamorous, but it was armor. The rumors fizzled, because lies die faster when a community refuses to be ashamed of the truth. Around that time, a woman named Mei Liu tried a different angle. She was not my biological mother, but she had once been a clinic supervisor, and she had been on duty the night the babies were switched. For years, she had stayed quiet, protected by the clinic's bureaucracy. Now she smelled publicity. She called me from an unknown number and said she had proof that the Liu family had tried to hide the swap, and she wanted money for her suffering. Her voice was oily with confidence, the confidence of someone who thinks rural people don't know how to fight back. I asked her to repeat her claim slowly. I recorded the call. Then I filed a complaint with the County Health Bureau, attaching the recording and requesting an investigation into the clinic's old records, staff rosters, and incident reporting. May's confidence evaporated the moment authority turned its eyes toward her. She called again to negotiate. I didn't answer. A week later, I received a formal notice that the county would review the clinic's archival practices and accountability procedures. It did not fix the past, but it did something rare. It forced an institution to look at its own negligence and name it. Suyin heard about the tabloid and the clinic complaint and called me late one night. "They're doing this to pressure you," she said, "to make you come back and resolve the embarrassment." "I know," I replied. "Embarrassment is their favorite tool." She hesitated. "I can shut down the tabloid angle," she admitted. "I can buy ads, squeeze their revenue, pull contracts. I have leverage now." I stared at the dark ceiling of my room, listening to the rain on the roof. "Don't," I said. "If you use power the way they use power, you'll end up built from the same material. Let the rumors die from lack of oxygen, not from your fist." There was silence on the line. Then she exhaled, slow. "You're right," she said. "I hate that you're right." Her corporate battles sharpened after that. The logistics arm she had taken over was profitable, but rotten in its habits. Drivers were underpaid. Safety checks were skipped. Contracts were awarded based on favors rather than performance. Suyin began cleaning it like someone scraping mold off a wall, and every scrape offended someone's wallet. Liu Yichen's allies tried to sabotage her by leaking internal emails and planting errors in route schedules. She responded by implementing systems: barcode scans at every transfer point, dual approval for payments, random audits, and a hotline for drivers to report coercion. She was learning what I had learned in the village. You cannot build trust with speeches. You build it with repeatable procedures. One morning she sent me a photograph, a warehouse wall painted with a new slogan her drivers had chosen. It wasn't poetry. It was practical. "Arrive safe." Beneath it, a small note in Suyin's handwriting read, "This is what family should have meant." That summer, we expanded our village program beyond crops. We partnered with a vocational school in the county to run weekend workshops, basic accounting, hospitality, food safety, first aid, and small business licensing. We created scholarships funded by a percentage of our tourism revenue, so village kids who wanted to study could do it without their parents selling a season's harvest. The first student to win the scholarship was Grandma Sun's grandson, the boy from the fever night, who declared he wanted to become a doctor, so bridges won't be the only rescue. When he said it, the adults laughed, then quietly wiped their eyes when they thought nobody was looking. The township head visited again, this time with journalists. He tried to put his arm around my shoulder for the camera. I stepped half a pace away and handed him a hard hat. "If you want a photo," I said, "wear this and walk the site." The journalists laughed, and the township head, trapped by optics, did as I asked. He toured the terraces, sweated in the sun, and for 10 minutes looked like a human being rather than a stamp machine. When a second rainy season arrived, the river rose again, wild and brown, but the new bridge held. We tested the emergency shelter. We ran drills with the school children. We sent supplies to the elderly before the storm could trap anyone. For the first time in my memory, a rainstorm felt like weather rather than fate. I stood at the bridge rail watching the water crash beneath and felt something unfamiliar. Security. That night, I wrote a short report for the county about the clinic investigation, the bridge impact, and the supply chain changes. I did not include my feelings. I included numbers. I included timelines. I included recommendations. That is how I protect my village. Not with dramatic declarations, but with documents that make it harder for anyone to pretend we don't exist. The Liu family's final attempt to reclaim me arrived like a staged apology. Liu Jiancheng came to the village with Wenya, 2 assistants, and a gift box filled with expensive supplements that nobody in Willow Creek wanted. They wore simple clothes as if cosplay could erase history. Wenya's eyes were red, and she clasped my hands as if the gesture could rewrite her earlier disgust. "Meow," she said, voice trembling. "We were wrong. We were blind. We didn't understand you." Behind them, Yichen and Yiran stayed in the car, unwilling to dirty their image with humility. I could see Yichen's face through the windshield, impatient, calculating. Wenya spoke of regret. She spoke of family. She spoke of how much she missed me, though we had never shared a memory to miss. She praised my village work as if it were a hobby she could compliment, and then she offered the real request: "Come back, take your place. The company needs you. The family needs you." I listened without interrupting. Then I asked one question. "When you found me in the field," I said, "did you tell me to set down the sacks and rest?" Wenya blinked, confused. "You didn't." I continued. "You asked if I could read. You asked if I was married. You asked how many children I had. You wanted to know whether I would embarrass you." My voice stayed calm, because anger would have made the moment about emotion rather than truth. "You didn't come to bring me home. You came to measure whether I was usable." Liu Jiancheng's face hardened. "That's unfair," he said. "It's accurate," I corrected. "Unfair is what you did to 2 babies 26 years ago when you let the clinic hide the mistake because it was convenient." Wenya's lips trembled. "We didn't know," she pleaded. "You didn't want to know," I replied. "There's a difference." I took the gift box and handed it to Grandma Chu, who immediately opened it and announced, loudly, that the pills looked like fish food. The villagers chuckled. Wenya flushed with humiliation, then looked around at the village faces, and seemed, for the first time, to understand that she had walked into a place where my worth was not negotiable. "I won't return," I said. "Not to be your daughter on display. Not to be your asset. Not to be your excuse." Liu Jiancheng's jaw clenched. "If you refuse, you will lose everything the Liu family can give." I smiled, because the threat was absurd in the presence of the bridge outside, the terraces above, the people behind me. "You can't take away what you never built," I said. "I already have everything I need to keep working." Wenya's shoulders collapsed. She looked at me as if I were a stranger, then as if she were the stranger. For a second I saw true grief, raw and unfiltered. I did not comfort her. Comfort is for people who earned it. When they left, the village returned to its rhythm. Someone asked if the Liu family would cause trouble. I shrugged. "If they do," I said, "we'll solve it the way we solve everything, together." Suyin watched the car disappear down the road. "They'll blame me," she said, bitterness sharp. "They'll blame whoever won't obey," I answered. "Let them waste their energy." The weeks that followed proved that the village's future did not depend on the Liu family's approval. The citrus shipments continued. Tourists arrived in larger waves, drawn by the flower path and the lotus pond and the story of a village that had built its own bridge. We expanded into tea and honey. We trained young villagers in customer service and bookkeeping. The township head visited and pretended he had always supported us. I let him pretend, because politics is another kind of weather. You don't win by yelling at clouds. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Suyin stood by the river and looked at the bridge lights reflecting on the water. "I used to think being an heiress meant being protected," she said softly. "Now I see it meant being contained." "You can step out of containment," I said. "It's just uncomfortable at first." She turned to me. "Do you ever regret not taking the easy life?" she asked. I thought of the Liu estate's polished floors, the pink bedroom, the way Wenya's gaze had slid over me like a critic. I thought of the hospital hallway full of villagers with broken nails because they had dug me out. I thought of the bridge pillars rising from the river and the first bus crossing it. The answer arrived without hesitation. "No," I said. "Easy isn't the same as safe." Suyin nodded, and in that nod I saw the end of our old pact turning into something new. We were still distant. We were still careful. But distance, I realized, did not have to mean coldness. It could mean boundaries, and boundaries were a kind of respect. When the next rainy season came, the river rose again, but it did not swallow our life. The bridge held. The clinic stayed reachable. Children crossed to school with